Negative thinking styles is not just some buzzy therapy way of saying that you're not looking on the bright side of things. In fact, negative thinking styles can be destructive and damaging. And the one that we're going to look at today can not just contribute to feelings of anxiety and depression, but can actually keep you there. Dichotomous thinking, sometimes known as black and white thinking or polarized thinking, is when you think in extremes. So it's most often categorized as thinking things are either good or bad.
Hello.
Thinking things are right or wrong. Sometimes that plays out in our negative self-talk. So if you find yourself saying, I'm terrible at cooking, or I'm the worst at driving. A husband says to his wife, you never take out the trash. A boss says to his employee, you're always late. These are very clear signs of polarized or dichotomous thinking. It's when we separate things into one or the other. Catastrophizing can come into dichotomous thinking because often the dichotomy, the two sides of it, are in such extremes. We go to this very negative space. Thinking in extremes in this way can mean that you're not looking at the nuances. Now, of course, we are all guilty of sometimes thinking in this dichotomous way, even saying things like, I had the worst day ever. Well, chances are it was not the worst day ever. It may have been a bad day with some bad things going on or things that weren't ideal. We use this way of thinking a lot, but when it becomes destructive is when it changes your idea of what's actually going on. And like in some of the examples that I used, it can be a serious source of conflict when you go to extremes in how you communicate about other people's actions. If you've been on the receiving end of someone who has slipped into this dichotomous thought style, then it can be very hurtful when they are saying something like, you always do this, you never do this. You always leave the lights on. You never hand things in on time. It can be hurtful when you know that, okay, that has happened a few times, but it's by no means the full picture. Now, the truth is we come by this dichotomous thinking style. Honestly, most psychologists agree that it is connected to our flight, fight, and freeze instinct, which means that back in the day, our ancestors actually needed this black and white approach to the world in order to save their bacon. So if a saber-toothed tiger was coming to attack them, they're not going to be distracted by nuanced thinking, wondering if that tiger is trying to protect its cubs, or maybe hasn't had enough to eat recently and that's why he looks so angry. They're just going to run or they're going to attack, and that is going to save their life. But most of us are not dealing with life-threatening situations on a daily basis. However, this black and white thinking, this dichotomous thinking lingers, and it can have a damaging effect because it can keep you in a place of anxiety. If you are convincing yourself that things are actually in this extreme, so something is either good or bad, something is either right or wrong, you are either good or bad, you have either succeeded or you failed, it can hold you in a place of feeling fearful, feeling frightened, feeling sad, feeling lonely, depending on where you've let this generalization go to. That's why we see it a lot in negative self-talk, this idea that I am bad at this because I have struggled with it sometimes. Well, struggling with a specific endeavor, perhaps I'm bad at job interviews, is the negative self-talk because there's been a number of job interviews that have gone really badly. Well, by just saying I'm bad at it, by allowing that to become the reality, then we stop looking for solutions. We accept it as fact and we feel defeated by that fact. Whereas if we can change our vocabulary and change how we think about it, start seeing the nuances, then it can become, I've really struggled with the last few job interviews. I wonder how I can improve so that my next one doesn't go so badly. So if any of this is sounding familiar to you, if you are aware that you may be falling into the trap of dichotomous thinking, then don't worry, because actually the way to get unstuck and out of this particular thought pattern is pretty straightforward, but it starts with being honest with yourself. You need to start listening to the words that you use. Most of dichotomous thinking has telltale vocabulary attached to it. We've mentioned them, some of them already. Things like always, things like never, things like every time, every day, every year. Every time I see you, you're doing this. Every time I go to do this, this happens. These kinds of extremes. But we also see it in bad, the good, right? This is bad, this is good. I am bad, I am good. We can see it in definitions of failure. So there's an extreme approach. I either succeed or I fail. It's either win or lose. Now, of course, sometimes that is going to be the case, but more often there's more to the story than that. So if someone sees that passing the test is success and failing the test is failure, well, what about all of the gray in between? Like, I didn't get the mark that I wanted to achieve the score I needed to open this particular opportunity for me. However, by taking the test, I learned this about my studying skills. It allowed me to understand more about what I need to work on for the future. Or I realized where my strengths lie and where my weaknesses are so that I can choose to turn my attention to those weaknesses, right? If we stay in this extreme thinking where something is either this or this, then we don't look for the solutions. So listen to your vocabulary. Learn what your trigger words are. What are the words that are a telltale sign you have slipped into this dichotomous thinking? Write a list down of what your trigger words are, because then once you've written them down, your fantastic RAS, that reticular activation system in your brain, will start noticing more and more times when you are using this dichotomous thinking. And when you spot it happening, when you catch yourself saying these things either out loud or in your head that are a telltale sign that you're in a place of dichotomous thinking, then you start to go to the feeling, not the thought. This is how it works. You say, I feel, and then you put your emotion word in. So I feel angry. I feel lonely. I feel scared. I feel nervous. Your colleague has not forwarded an email about a meeting later this afternoon. And you think to yourself, he is always letting me down. There's that trigger word. You know that you've slipped into black and white thinking. You go to the feeling. I feel frustrated that I didn't know about the meeting in time. Or I feel nervous because I'm now underprepared because my colleague didn't do this for me. What is the feeling? Remember, the thought that you're having, that's an untruth, because your colleague in this example hasn't let you down every single moment of every single day that you've been working together. In that moment, you have gone to the extremes, and that is how it's come out. He is always letting me down. But that thought is an untruth. The feeling is real, which is why we need to identify what the feeling is. When we can separate the feeling from the thoughts, that's when we can start to recognize that we're in this place of dichotomous thinking and start looking for the solution, but not until we've identified the feeling and separated it from the thought. The thought is the untruth. The thought is the lie. The thought is the extreme. The feeling is your reality. And we need to accept that reality and go, okay, so right now I'm feeling nervous. I'm feeling panicky. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling frustrated. And then we look at why. Why is it? What's the root cause of that feeling? So a husband says to his wife, you never take out the trash. The truth is, that wife has taken out the trash once or twice, or she contributes to something else in the house, or actually they agreed at some point that the husband was to take out the trash and the wife was to do the dishes, whatever it might be. The reality is not probably that wife has never taken out the trash, but that's what the thought is in that moment. So the husband's job is to go, okay, I feel let down, or I feel overburdened by the chores, or I feel frustrated that I'm having to do so much. Okay, so we can work with that feeling. That feeling allows a gateway into a solution. But you have to get to that point when you've identified your feeling first. And then when you've identified your feeling and you've distanced it from the thought, you can start to look at what the solution might be. If it's within a conflict with someone else, you can start to look at communicating that feeling so that you can put your side across and you can say what's going on for you and why you're experiencing the feeling that you're experiencing. And that gives the other person an opportunity to understand where you're coming from and put their side across as well. If it's an internalized situation, if this is coming up in your negative self-talk, then by identifying the feeling, you can look at the facts and you do this fantastic process, which I call taking your thought to court. So let's say your negative self-talk, where you've identified you have this dichotomous thinking, is I am horrible at relationships, right? This person in this scenario has just had another failed relationship, another breakup, and they internalize this with this negative thought pattern. I am horrible at having relationships. Okay, so we identify that horrible is one of our trigger words in this specific example. And the feeling is, I feel lonely. I feel discouraged, maybe, at another failed relationship. The thought was, I am horrible. The thought was, I am horrible at relationships. Right. Take it to court and you start looking for evidence for and against. Now, this person in this example may have a lot of evidence for. They might have this relationship that didn't work out, and here's why it didn't work out, and this relationship that didn't work out, and this is why it didn't work out. But as many reasons as there are for that argument to be true, what are the reasons that can prove that this argument is not true? How can we prove that actually this person is not horrible at relationships? Can they point to a relationship where actually there was something positive there, where something went well, where they brought something to the table that was good and kind and considerate and empathetic? And once we take that thought to court, once we have evidence for and against that thought, we can no longer fully believe it, because we're clever. We don't like to lie to ourselves. The thought is a lie, but if we found evidence to why that thought is not true, then the next time we jump into that dichotomous thinking and we latch on to that false thought, there will be a part of our brains going, I know that this is not fully real. And then we go back into the feeling, I feel this, and we start looking for the solution. How can I change this situation? What do I do to make it better? What can I learn from this? What can I change? That's dichotomous thinking. Check out the description box below and leave me a comment. Let me know your examples of dichotomous thinking and how it has affected you and which solutions you're going to take and apply. I'll see you next time.